What if everything you're doing to cope with anxiety is actually making it worse? I discovered something in Buddhist teachings that changed my relationship with anxiety in weeks, and it goes against everything modern psychology tells us. This isn't about breathing exercises or positive thinking. This is about understanding something so fundamental about your mind that once you see it, anxiety loses its grip on you permanently. Let me start with what I used to do when anxiety hit. But what if I told you that anxiety isn't actually the problem? What if the real issue is something completely different, something so simple that once you understand it, the entire structure of your anxiety begins to crumble? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you changed everything for me. And I've seen it transform the lives of countless others who felt like they'd tried everything and nothing worked. Let me start by telling you about the worst period of my life. I was 26 years old, sitting in my apartment at 3 in the morning, heart racing, palms sweating, convinced that something was terribly wrong with me. I'd been to 5 different doctors that year. I'd had blood tests, heart monitors, brain scans, you name it. Everything came back normal, but I didn't feel normal. I felt like I was dying, like my body was betraying me, like my mind was broken beyond repair. The doctors kept telling me it was just anxiety, but that didn't make sense to me, because anxiety was supposed to be about being worried about something specific, right? But I was anxious about everything and nothing at the same time. I was anxious when I woke up, anxious when I tried to sleep, anxious when I was alone, anxious when I was with people. It was like living inside a prison where the walls were made of my own thoughts, and every time I tried to escape, the walls just got thicker. Here's what nobody tells you about anxiety, and this is crucial. Anxiety isn't actually an emotion. I know that sounds crazy because we've been taught our entire lives that anxiety is a feeling, something we experience, something that happens to us. But that's not quite accurate. Anxiety is actually a response, a reaction, a symptom of something deeper. It's like having a fever. The fever isn't the disease, it's your body's response to an infection. In the same way, anxiety isn't the core problem. It's your mind and body's response to a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of reality, safety, and control. And once you understand what that misunderstanding is, once you really see it clearly, anxiety loses its power over you. It doesn't mean you'll never feel anxious again, but it means anxiety will no longer be this overwhelming force that dictates your life. So what is this misunderstanding? It's this belief, this deep-seated conviction that most of us aren't even aware we have, that we need to control our internal experience in order to be okay. Let me say that again because it's so important. The root of anxiety is the belief that we need to control our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, our internal state in order to be safe, happy, or functional. And the reason this creates anxiety is because our internal experience is actually uncontrollable. Think about it. Can you decide right now to stop thinking for the next 60 seconds? Can you force yourself to feel happy when you're sad? Can you make your heart rate slow down just by wanting it to? Of course not. Our internal world operates largely on autopilot, influenced by thousands of factors we're not even conscious of, from our nervous system state to our blood sugar levels, to memories we don't even remember we have. So when we believe we need to control something that is inherently uncontrollable, we create a situation that generates constant anxiety. Here's how this plays out in real life. Let's say you have social anxiety. You're about to go to a party and you start feeling anxious. Now, most people think the anxiety is about the party, about being judged, about saying something stupid. And yes, those thoughts might be there, but the deeper issue is this. You believe you need to control your anxiety in order to go to the party successfully. You think you need to make yourself feel calm, confident, relaxed. You need to control your thoughts so you don't think anxious thoughts. You need to control your body so your hands don't shake and your voice doesn't tremble. And because you can't actually control these things, because the more you try to force yourself to feel calm, the more anxious you become, you end up in this escalating spiral. The anxiety about controlling your anxiety becomes worse than the original anxiety about the party. This is what I call the anxiety trap, and it's absolutely everywhere once you start looking for it. Or let's take another example, health anxiety. You feel a weird sensation in your chest. Immediately, your mind goes to the worst-case scenario. Heart attack. You start scanning your body for more symptoms. Is that tingling in your arm? Is your breathing shallow? Now you're anxious. And what do? You try to make the anxiety go away. You try to convince yourself you're fine. You try to distract yourself. You try to rationalize. You Google your symptoms, hoping that will give you certainty and make the fear disappear. But none of it works for long. Why? Because the fundamental belief operating underneath all of this is that you need to feel certain and safe in order to be okay. You need to control your fear and your uncertainty. And since you can't actually achieve absolute certainty about your health, since fear is not something you can simply turn off like a light switch, you remain trapped in the cycle. The more you try to get rid of the anxiety, the more it persists. This is the paradox at the heart of anxiety, and it's something that took me years to understand. The effort to control, eliminate, or escape from your internal experience is precisely what perpetuates and intensifies that experience. It's like quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. Or it's like holding a beach ball underwater. It takes enormous effort, and the moment you relax your grip, it shoots back up to the surface with even more force. Your anxiety is that beach ball, and every strategy you've been using to fight it, suppress it, or get rid of it is the effort of holding it down. And it's exhausting, isn't it? It's utterly draining to be in constant battle with yourself, to feel like you have to vigilantly monitor and manage your internal state every moment of every day. Now, I know what you might be thinking. If trying to control anxiety makes it worse, what am I supposed to do? Just let it overwhelm me. Just accept that I'm going to feel terrible forever. And this is where we need to be really careful, because there's a subtle but crucial distinction here. I'm not saying you should resign yourself to suffering or that you should suppress your desire to feel better. What I'm pointing to is a completely different approach, one that doesn't involve fighting with your experience or trying to make it different than it is. It's about understanding something fundamental about the nature of thoughts, feelings, and sensations, something that when you really get it changes everything. Here's the key insight. Your thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations are temporary, transient phenomena that arise and pass away on their own. They're like weather patterns moving through the sky of your consciousness. You don't have to do anything to make them leave. You don't have to struggle with them or figure them out or fix them. They have their own natural life cycle, and they will move through and change all by themselves if you don't interfere with them. The problem is that we've been conditioned to believe that we need to do something about our uncomfortable internal experiences. We need to analyze them, understand them, solve them, get rid of them. We treat our thoughts and feelings like problems that require solutions, like enemies that need to be defeated. And in doing so, we actually keep them alive. We feed them with our attention and our resistance. We turn a passing cloud into a permanent storm. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. You're lying in bed trying to sleep, and an anxious thought pops into your head. Maybe it's about something you said earlier that day, or something you have to do tomorrow, or just a vague sense of dread. Now, if you understand that this thought is just a thought, just a temporary mental event that will pass on its own, you might notice it and then let your attention drift elsewhere. Maybe you notice your breath or the feeling of the pillow under your head or the sounds outside your window. The thought will likely fade into the background and eventually disappear. But if you believe you need to do something about the thought, if you think you need to figure it out, resolve it, or make it go away, then you engage with it. You start thinking about the thought. You analyze why you're having it. You try to reassure yourself. You argue with it. And now you're wide awake, mind racing, anxiety building, all because you didn't understand that the thought was just passing through and didn't require your intervention. This might sound too simple, maybe even dismissive of how real and overwhelming anxiety feels, but I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying anxiety isn't real or that it doesn't feel absolutely terrible when you're in it. What I'm saying is that our relationship to anxiety, our understanding of what it is and what we need to do about it, is what determines whether it's a passing discomfort or a chronic condition that dominates our lives. And this isn't just philosophical theory. There's actually a ton of research backing this up. Studies on psychological flexibility, acceptance and commitment therapy, and mindfulness-based approaches all point to the same conclusion. Trying to control, avoid, or suppress unwanted internal experiences leads to increased psychological distress, while accepting them and allowing them to be present without struggle leads to better mental health outcomes. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you stop trying to control your anxiety, when you stop treating it like an enemy that needs to be defeated, something remarkable happens. The anxiety doesn't necessarily go away immediately, but it stops being so scary. It stops being this massive, overwhelming thing that you need to organize your entire life around. It becomes just another experience, uncomfortable, sure, but not dangerous, not meaningful, not something you need to fix. And paradoxically, when anxiety stops being scary, when you stop being anxious about your anxiety, that's when it actually starts to diminish naturally, not because you're trying to make it go away, but because you're no longer adding fuel to the fire. I remember the first time I really got this, the first time I experienced it in my body rather than just understanding it intellectually. I was having a panic attack, which at that point in my life had become a regular occurrence. My heart was pounding, I was dizzy, I couldn't catch my breath, and all the familiar catastrophic thoughts were racing through my mind. But instead of doing what I usually did, which was trying to calm myself down, trying to breathe deeply, trying to talk myself out of the panic, I just stopped. I stopped fighting, I stopped trying to make it different. I said to myself, okay, this is what a panic attack feels like. This is what's happening right now. And I just let it be there. I didn't try to push it away or escape from it. I didn't try to figure out why it was happening or what I needed to do about it. I just allowed it. And you know what happened? Nothing. I mean, the panic attack ran its course like it always did, but it wasn't as terrifying because I wasn't adding my resistance and struggle on top of it. And more importantly, I realized something profound. I could survive these sensations without fighting them. They weren't going to kill me or make me lose my mind. They were just uncomfortable physical sensations and scary thoughts, nothing more. That was the beginning of my freedom from anxiety, although I didn't fully realize it at the time. Because from that point on, panic attacks started losing their power over me. They still happened for a while, but I wasn't as afraid of them anymore. And when you're not afraid of your anxiety, when you're not anxious about being anxious, that entire self-perpetuating cycle begins to break down. It's like the anxiety has nothing to hold on to anymore. Now, I want to address something important here, because I think there's a common misconception about what I'm describing. Some people hear this and think I'm saying you should just passively accept everything and never take action to improve your situation. That's not it at all. There's a huge difference between accepting your internal experience and accepting your external circumstances. You can fully accept that you're feeling anxious right now while still taking meaningful action in your life. In fact, you're much more capable of effective action when you're not constantly at war with yourself. Think about it. When you're spending all your energy trying to control your anxiety, trying to make yourself feel differently, trying to avoid situations that might trigger uncomfortable feelings, you have very little energy left for actually living your life, for pursuing what matters to you, for growing and learning and connecting with others. But when you accept your internal experience, when you're willing to feel anxious if that's what shows up, you free up all that energy for action that's aligned with your values rather than controlled by your fear. This is what I mean when I say anxiety falls apart when you understand this. It's not that anxiety disappears completely or that you never feel uncomfortable again. It's that anxiety stops being this monolithic obstacle that stands between you and the life you want to live. It becomes just another aspect of the human experience, sometimes present, sometimes not, but no longer running the show. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice, because I think that's where a lot of people get confused. They understand the concept intellectually, but don't know how to actually apply it in their daily lives. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you immediately feel that familiar knot of anxiety in your stomach. You have an important meeting at work, and your mind is already spinning with all the things that could go wrong. The old approach, the approach most of us have been taught, is to try to manage the anxiety. Maybe you do some breathing exercises, or you give yourself a pep talk, or you try to think positive thoughts. And there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those things. But if you're doing them from a place of needing to get rid of the anxiety, if you're doing them because you believe you can't go to the meeting feeling anxious, then you're still trapped in the control paradigm. The new approach is different. You wake up, you notice the anxiety, and instead of immediately trying to fix it or change it, you just acknowledge it. Oh, there's anxiety. My body is activated right now. There are anxious thoughts about the meeting. And you let that be okay. You don't try to make it go away, but you also don't wallow in it or make it mean something terrible about you. It's just what's present right now. Then you get up, and you do what you need to do to prepare for your day. You shower, you eat breakfast, you get dressed, and the anxiety might be there the whole time, or it might fade in and out. But you're not making your actions contingent on it disappearing. You're living your life alongside the anxiety, rather than waiting for it to go away before you can live. This might sound like a subtle distinction, but it makes all the difference in the world. Because when you're willing to take action while feeling anxious, when you're willing to go to the meeting with anxiety present, you break the association between anxiety and danger. You teach your nervous system through direct experience that anxiety is not a stop sign, not an indication that something's wrong, just an uncomfortable sensation that you can function with. And over time, as you accumulate these experiences of doing things despite feeling anxious, your brain starts to recalibrate. It starts to realize that anxiety isn't actually predicting danger or catastrophe. It's just noise, just a false alarm. And when your brain realizes this through repeated experience, it starts producing less of it naturally. Here's another layer to this that I think is really important. A lot of anxiety is actually anxiety about the future, anxiety about things that haven't happened yet and might never happen. We spend so much time in our minds running simulations of potential disasters, trying to prepare for every possible negative outcome, that we miss the fact that right here, right now, in this present moment, we're almost always okay. I'm not saying bad things never happen, obviously they do, but the vast majority of our suffering comes not from what's actually happening, but from our thoughts about what might happen, what could happen, what would be terrible if it happened. And thoughts about the future, no matter how vivid or compelling they are not reality. They're mental constructs, imagination, and they have no power over you unless you give them that power by treating them as if they're true. This is where presence becomes so crucial. When you're fully present with what's actually here right now, not lost in thoughts about the past or future, anxiety has much less room to operate. Now, I'm not saying you should never think about the future or plan ahead. Of course you should. But there's a difference between practical planning and anxious rumination. Practical planning is focused and productive. You identify a potential problem, you come up with a solution, and then you move on. Anxious rumination is repetitive and unproductive. You go over the same scenarios again and again without ever reaching resolution. You spin in circles of what-if thinking that doesn't lead anywhere useful. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to do what you can do, what's actually within your control, and then let go of the rest. You can prepare for your meeting, but you can't control exactly how it will go. You can take care of your health, but you can't eliminate all possibility of illness. You can be kind in your relationships, but you can't control how other people respond. There's a certain humility required here, a recognition of the limits of your control. When you let go of the need for absolute certainty and control, when you accept that life is inherently uncertain, something interesting happens. You start to relax. Not because everything becomes perfect, but because you've stopped exhausting yourself trying to achieve the impossible. And in that relaxation, anxiety naturally diminishes. I want to share something else that I think is really powerful. Once you understand what I've been talking about, you can start to become curious about anxiety, rather than afraid of it. Instead of treating anxiety as this terrible thing, you can explore it. What does anxiety actually feel like in your body? Where do you feel it? What's the quality of the sensation? This shift from resistance to curiosity is enormously powerful because curiosity is incompatible with fear. You can't be genuinely curious about something and terrified of it at the same time. Curiosity creates space between you and your experience. You're no longer completely identified with the anxiety. You're observing it, relating to it in a different way. And in that space, you have freedom and choice. So let me bring all of this together. If there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this. You don't need to fix, eliminate, or control your anxiety to live a full and meaningful life. Anxiety is not the obstacle you think it is. The real obstacle is the belief that you can't move forward, can't function, can't be okay while feeling anxious. That belief is what keeps you stuck, not the anxiety itself. And the moment you're willing to challenge that belief, the moment you're willing to take action toward what matters to you, regardless of whether anxiety is present, that's the moment you begin to reclaim your freedom. You don't have to wait until your anxiety goes away to start living. You can start living right now, anxiety and all. Anxiety falls apart when you understand this, because the entire structure of chronic anxiety is built on the foundation of believing you need to control your internal experience. Remove that foundation, and the structure has nothing to stand on. You don't need to fight anxiety or defeat it. You just need to see through the illusion that it's preventing you from living, and then start living anyway. So my invitation to you is to experiment with this in your own life. The next time you notice anxiety arising, instead of immediately trying to make it go away, pause, notice it, acknowledge it, and then ask yourself, what would I do right now if I was willing to feel this way? And then do that thing, take that action, move in the direction of your life while allowing anxiety to come along for the ride. You might be surprised at what becomes possible when you stop waiting for anxiety to give you permission to live.